This week on Africa Update, electronic banking platforms under pressure as Nigerians continue to suffer cash crunch following central bank policy to redesign currency. Is Nigeria ready for a cashless economy? Also on the program, Zimbabwe plans to build Zim Cyber City, a modern capital expected to cost up to $60 billion. We also bring you a highlight of some of the top stories from across the continent on Roundup Africa. This is Africa Update on Trust TV, reaching you from Abuja, Nigeria's capital. I am Ayuba Ilya. Thanks for joining. The Nigerian banking public continues to face hardship in accessing their funds as cash scarcity persists, while alternative channels have remained problematic at best. Data from the Nigeria Interbank Settlement System suggests that transactions worth at least 30 trillion naira are performed monthly using electronic platforms. At a time when these electronic transactions are expected to surge due to the naira redesign and the shortage of the physical cash, the platforms for these services are collapsing. Take a look.
Even the ATM machine service not now dispensing, and we have a lot of people waiting to get cash. And the funny thing there is that even your ATM card has a limited amount.
From zone 4 down to this supermarket here now, and I haven't seen money and there's no way for me to withdraw. So it's a very, very terrible something for me in particular. I don't know about other person, but I know other people are passing the same thing I'm passing through.
Currency right now in Nigeria now is affecting business, and not really market aren't going fine because of the difficulty in getting the new currency.
A little bit increment though in the pricing, you understand, but we will continue, we will buy. You understand, but if they add money, we will still buy.
As you can see, I'm just coming back from work with my load. I've been inside here for almost 2 hours. There's no money. I went to Access Bank. They were giving me 50 naira. What am I going to do with 50 naira?
If you go to banks, even on the counter, you cannot get. This morning, I was inside this bank here, UBA here, to withdraw money. We're told they have just 50 naira.
From morning till night, every day. Like yesterday, I was here to take some cash. I waited to almost 1 hour and some minutes. I didn't even have the cash. I went back. Today, I'm here again. There's nothing is happening here. Nothing.
We that do this POS, it's very difficult for us to get cash using the ATM. Like I myself here, I have account with Providence Bank. And Providence Bank is the only bank that has been consistent in keeping money in their ATM machine.
Now, according to the Global System for Mobile Communications, at the end of 2019, 45% of the population in sub-Saharan Africa subscribed to mobile services. As the mobile market will keep increasing, 1 billion people in sub-Saharan countries are expected to have mobile subscriptions by 2024 and 50% subscriber penetration by 2025. However, there are still some barriers to the generalization of a cashless economy on the continent. Apart from the unequal growth of mobile penetration, which has not yet reached 100% of the population, digital literacy and service fees for online transactions are also among the main barriers for citizens. The cashless policy of the central bank was first introduced in Nigeria in 2012 under the then governor of the Central Bank of Nigeria, Sanusi Lamido Sanusi. Now, why does the Nigerian banking system appears to be unprepared for a time such as this? For more perspectives, we have joining us a financial analyst, Idakolo Gabriel Bolade, to talk about this. Thank you so much for joining us on Africa Update.
Thank you for having me.
Yes. Can you give us an overview of the e-banking system in Nigeria from where you stand as a financial analyst?
Yes, the e-banking system in Nigeria is evolving, looking at the giant strides that has been made over the years and the improvements that has been recorded. we can discover that the penetration is where the challenge is, and the network challenges are also part of the problem. You discover that the e-banking system, as good as it is working well in the urban areas, but we're having problem with penetration in the rural areas. And if we are talking about the financial inclusion plan of the Central Bank of Nigeria, we believe that the e-banking system should go and permit down even to all the rural areas. That is why the mode of communication using the telephone system is even simplified, so that those that do not have Android phones or other phones can use even the normal handsets to do the USSD, to be able to also connect to the e-banking. But be that as it may, we discovered that there are still network challenges back end, which has also been pronounced with this present cashless economy that the CBN is trying to push. We discovered that because of the traffic on this platform, the platform is trying to, it's not being able to accommodate it because of the network challenge that we're having present. So the e-banking system, as good as it is, it needs improvement in Nigeria to be able to stand side by side with other African countries like Kenya that have gone a bit further than us.
Well, it's been at least a decade since the cashless economy policy was introduced by the Central Bank of Nigeria. What can you say about the investments that have been made so far? That's in technology now.
There has been significant improvement, but there is still one improvement that needs to be made, which is in the mindset of Nigerians as regards cash, because Nigerians still regard cash as a major means of transaction in the country. And if the mindset is not removed, it will be a major hindrance to the successful implementation of the cashless policy in Nigeria. In the past 10 years, due to gradual restrictions in place by the CBN through the deposit money banks, we have discovered that we have recorded some successes. And that is why we have seen Nigerians embracing this cashless economy to a large extent. But the recent development, as announced by CBN, of about 2.7 trillion out of the economy, out of the system of control by the CBN, has also shown us that Nigeria needs to change the mindset of keeping cash instead of putting it in the system. So as good as the cashless economy is now, it has some impediments that needs to be worked on to ensure that Nigerians embrace it wholeheartedly, knowing fully well that the system is going to go and they will be able to do transactions seamlessly.
Are you saying that the barriers that we have right now are more on the human side than the technological investment that is needed?
It's a combined barrier. Just like I said, the mindset of Nigerians is still pro-cash, but the network to be able to convince Nigerians further is still not able to do that, because we are seeing series of failures, series of network glitches over the past 2 weeks based on the transaction counts that has increased because of the cashless economy and the deadline for Nigerians to trade in their old notes for the new notes. So this science is what is not convincing Nigerians to fully embrace the cashless economy, because of the fear of transaction failures that will happen if they tend to bring in all their cash to the banking system.
There are those who are blaming the central bank, for instance, saying that the central bank should have given some time for the banks to be able to expand their technology, their bandwidth, and the rest of them to be able to accommodate, the demands and the pressure that will come with such a policy. So how much time really is realistic in this instance?
Actually, I believe that the deposit money banks in Nigeria used to upgrade their networks. But what we are seeing presently is that it seems as if the upgrade is not enough to cope with the traffic that we have presently. And that can also be attributed to the brain drain that we are experiencing in Nigeria. Most of the good hands in the tech industry have moved abroad. So leaving those that are just barely managing, and it's causing disruptions in the network of these banks. to the extent that sometimes when their networks break down, it takes it longer time to come up. So the banks the timing for the banks, I do not believe that is actually the problem, because the banks over time have been upgrading their network. But the personnel in their IT department needs to be called into question presently as concerning their competence to be able to hold the network together. So that is one of the major challenges. It might really not be that enough time is not given by CBN to these banks.
How much more investment is required to have an effective, e-banking system in this instance that we are talking about? What do banks need to do really to cash in on this?
In fact, this is the best time for banks to be able to take advantage of this opportunity by strengthening their networks. You will discover that our big banks, for example, like UBA and Zenith Bank, are failing in these areas with the kind of huge war chest of finances that they have. If a portion of their profit can be pumped into improving their networks, and Nigerians have confidence in those networks, there is no way they will not embrace them. Most of our tier 1 banks are failing us presently as regards these e-banking structures because their transactions are failing. I don't want to mention so many of them, but they have the resources to be able to expand the network to the extent that they will be able to accommodate the traffic that is coming on their system. If Nigerians can have assurance that when they do transactions, it will not fail or bounce back or they will lose their funds, they will embrace the banking sector. So the deposit money banks need to improve on the resources they are expending on their IT infrastructure to ensure that it can be able to cope with the incoming transaction counts based on in-banking and the cashless economy.
You know, we've had stories about states where you would find probably maybe one bank in an entire local government, or perhaps maybe just a few in the entire state. And stories like that, especially in the northern part of the country, the northeast, and to be specific, we had in Borno State where there are stories, Yobe State, where we had that perhaps only 3 banks are operating, in the entire state and all that. So, and then you would also see that there's a correlation between this and the insecurity that is being experienced in those areas. So, what are banks to do in this instance? That's a major hindrance, isn't it?
Actually, the major banks, you discover that there are some banks, because of the time of establishment, like First Bank, UBA, and some of the other banks that have been longer in the banking system in Nigeria, they tend to have branches in almost all the 704 local governments of Nigeria in order to meet the CBN guidelines and threshold. But again, you discover that, just like you said, because their spread is not enough, that is why we might be having challenges in being able to implement this cashless economy. So what these banks can do, especially those that have the largest spread in the country, they need to have super agents to be able to carry their transactions to these rural areas, to be able to effect the e-banking policy of CBN, and also to be able to have as many customers as possible. This is what is obtainable in countries like Kenya, where super agents are even the people, they are the ones that people interface with without even actually going to the commercial banks itself. So they need to improve on recruiting super agents to get to these areas, knowing very well as well that there are security challenges, which the super agents will be trained and be able to navigate those areas, because of they are not going to display whatever it is, whichever bank they are operating in, depending on the security of those areas. But they need to be trained to reach the rural areas and be able to win customers even for these banks if they are properly deployed to areas of need, just like you have said, in some states where we have only one bank, or in local governments where there are no banks at all.
All right, now let's talk about opportunities for investments here for investors. What are they, and how best is there for them to take advantage?
Nigeria is a very good investment hub for any investor to come in, especially our IT system. Because as you have seen now, Nigeria is a growing economy, and any formidable IT company that comes into Nigeria to profile solutions to the pending problems that we have will cash in on the economy. We have some IT infrastructures presently in place. Is either you provide backbone IT to commercial banks and other fintechs, or you come in as a fintech yourself to deploy services that people can embrace, and it will be seamless for the people. The opportunities are bound. Of recent, payment service banks were licensed by the CBN, just about 7 of them or thereabout. We could get more of that, and they could come into the system. The financial system in Nigeria is large enough for more investors to come in to take the advantage. And that is what we are asking for. When we have enough spread, we have people, even regional payment service operators that will concentrate in some areas and cash in those areas. It will really help the economy so that everyone will come on board and services will be rendered as at when due.
All right, let's look at, is this whole cashless policy, is this an uncharted territory for Nigeria? Or are there lessons in other parts of the world that Nigeria can learn from?
Definitely, we have lessons that we can learn from other countries that are practicing cashless economy. We have China, for example. China, you don't, all your transactions, some people in a year might not even see the Chinese yen, a note of it, because everything is online with their WeChat or their the other online platforms they have. And they've done it in a way that even in the marketplace, all you need to do is to scan your code and payments are received and payments are given. So we have to look at the experiences that they went through to ensure that we have a very solid infrastructure to back up our plans. Countries like China have been successful in cashless economy. We see countries like India improving on what they presently have to ensure that their customers, their citizens are enjoying the cashless economy. Down here in Africa, you see countries like Kenya improving on what they presently have to ensure that citizens enjoy cashless economy. When we take experiences from there and see how far they have gone and see what they have done, we need that Nigeria still has a long way to go in strengthening the backbone of the networks to ensure that when we eventually go cashless completely, we will be able to sustain it. Presently, we cannot do that.
Yeah, but Bolade, we have a huge issue here. We have a huge problem here, and that has to do with the literacy level. There's a correlation between that and, operating an e-banking system. So in terms of the literacy level, really, how much of a barrier is it?
That is a major barrier which the CBN can overcome if there is enough information and education down to the rural areas. All the people in the rural area needs is information on how to go about it. For example, information on how to use a USSD code is as simple for anyone, whether literate or illiterate, to be able to transact business on the line. So these informations need to get down to the grassroots on the simplest of it, the simplest form of e-banking, which is using the USSD code and other ones. When those ones are embraced, it arouses the interest of the people in those areas to want to go a step further. But if they have not tested the simpler ones to be able to use the USSD, for example, they will not want to take on the more complex ones, because all these things we are talking about, it's all about interest. If the people in the rural areas are not interested in the e-banking, they might not be able to embrace it as the CBN and the country wants it. So we need to carry the message to the areas, educate them, start with the simplest of it all, so that they can now pick up from there. This can be done in conjunction with government agencies like national orientation agencies and the rest, to reach the rural areas and talk to them about the need to embrace cashless banking. That is for the good of the country itself and for the security of their funds.
All All right, thank you so much, Idakolo Gabriel Walade, financial analyst. Thank you for joining us on Africa Update and sharing your perspectives on this.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah. This is Africa Update. After the break, we'll take a look at $60 billion worth proposed Zim Cyber City in Zimbabwe. Join us again for more details. Welcome back from that break. Now, Zimbabwe plans to build Zim Cyber City, a modern capital expected to cost up to $60 billion and include new government buildings and a presidential palace. Critics are blasting the plan as wasteful when more than half the population live in poverty and the government has let the current capital, Harare, fall apart. Now, Columbus Mavunga reports from Mount Hamden in the Mashonaland West province of Zimbabwe. Take a look.
The Zimbabwe government says the community of Mount Hamden, a 30-minute drive from Harare, will be the site of Zim Cyber City, which will replace Harare as the capital and relieve some of its congestion. Some of the construction is expected to be completed by year's end.
Obviously, we are building the cyber city because there's a market for it. There are Zimbabweans who can actually afford it. And we want our Zimbabweans, even those in diaspora, this is time to come back home. They can't continue to see the high-rise buildings in abroad and not in Zimbabwe.
Some Zimbabweans in this farming area can't wait for the project to begin.
When construction starts, we will be employed for some jobs.
Others have already started building nearby, hoping to cash in by providing accommodation for the $60 billion project that UAE-based firm Malk International is helping develop. But some Zimbabweans want President Emmerson Mnangagwa to first address the country's economic problems and dilapidated power and water infrastructure. And that's not all that needs fixing, says James Nehoa, who opposes the project.
It's not very wise to start by investing in Goa City when roads have not been developed yet, because you find it, because of the current conditions of the roads, potholes and all that, it's causing accidents, damages to cars, etc.
Stephen Chan, a world politics professor at the School of Oriental and African Studies in the University of London, is also against building Zim Cyber City in Mount Hamden.
This is for the Zimbabwean elite in Mount Hampton, so that the poor people won't get in their way. They can live by themselves and imagine that they're in a separate world. I think this speaks to a big division in society, which is simply not healthy for the future of Zimbabwe.
That advice might be falling on deaf ears as President Emmerson Mnangagwa's government seemed determined to build, saying it will help the economy and ease congestion in Harare. Plus, thanks to Chinese investment, a 6-story, $140 million parliament building has already been built on the Cyber City side as a gift to Zimbabwe.
Time now for us to take a look at Roundup Africa with Chiamaka Mwafo.
Uganda has said it will not renew the mandate of the United Nations Human Rights Office in the East African country, citing the development of its own sufficient capacity to monitor rights compliance. In a letter by Uganda's Foreign Affairs Ministry sent to Office of the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights on February 3rd and seen by Reuters on Wednesday, the ministry noted progress Uganda had made in developing a domestic capacity to monitor rights as the main reason for its decision. President Yoweri Museveni's government has over the years been criticized by the opposition, human rights activists in Western countries for various rights violations, including torture, illegal detentions and extrajudicial killings of opponents and critics. The OHCHR Uganda office was established in 2006 and was initially allowed to focus only on human rights issues in conflict-plagued areas in Uganda's north and northeast, according to the Ugandan government. It was later allowed to cover the rest of the country. Moscow is seeking to expand its influence in Africa as a diplomatic tug-of-war between global powers continues on the continent. Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov has pledged assistance to West African states battling armed groups as Moscow seeks to expand its influence on the continent. Lavrov on Tuesday hailed the alliance that has been forged between Moscow and Bamako in fighting armed groups on his first visit to Mali, which Russia's top diplomat described as historic. Mali had long relied on former colonial power France for military assistance in fighting the armed uprising, but Paris pulled troops out of the West African nation last year as tensions with the military government reached a breaking point. Since seizing power in 2020, Mali's military government has brought in Russian planes, helicopters and paramilitaries to strengthen its fight against armed rebels. The landlocked state is the epicenter of a conflict that began in northern Mali in 2012 and spread to neighboring Niger and Burkina Faso in 2015. Thousands of civilians have died across the three countries and millions have fled their homes. And finally, at least 38 people were killed and more than 130 others injured following 2 days of fighting in Las Anot town in eastern Somaliland. Health officials also reported Las Anot General Hospital, the town's main medical center, was hit by suspected mortars. Ahmed Mohammed Hassan, the hospital director, said the hospital was targeted Monday and Tuesday and that some of the staffers and patients fled the facility to seek safety elsewhere. Hassan also said other hospitals recorded casualties, but he did not give additional figures because he was not in communication with those medical facilities. Somaliland declared its secession from Somalia in May of 1991. It has not yet achieved international recognition. Despite the lack of recognition, Somaliland was widely praised by the international community for achieving stability and holding democratic elections. The clashes between Somaliland forces and local fighters comes after weeks of tension in the town following the killing of a local politician by masked gunmen. It was the latest in a series of assassinations in the town over many years, incidents which authorities blamed on Al-Shabaab fighters. And that's it on Roundup Africa.
And that's a wrap on Africa Update for this week. Join us next week for another time on the program. Watch more via all our social media platforms and also on our YouTube live stream. I am Ayuba Ilya. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.